Welcome to Commentary for the Satellite Bible Atlas, the Negev, Part 2. In the previous video, Negev Part 1, we introduced some of the main features of the northern or biblical Negev. This current video examines the regions further south and east on Map 112. Note the wilderness of Zin in the center of the map. The Zin wilderness is high, rocky desert whose canyons drain from Kadesh Barnea on the left side of the map to the south side of the Dead Sea. The site of Kadesh Barnea was the main camp of the Israelites during the 40-year sojourn in the desert. As shown on map 3-4, the wilderness of Zin, Kadesh Barnea, and the Brook of Egypt define the southern border of the Promised Land. Note that the Brook of Egypt is not the Nile River, but the main wadi that drains central Sinai, called today Wadi el-Arish.
We're standing on the edge of the wilderness of Zin, and according to Numbers chapter 34, we are on the southern edge of the Promised Land.
The main artery of the wilderness of Zin, seen here, can function as a route that connects the wilderness highlands to the south side of the Dead Sea. While flash floods may occur, most of the year the region is very dry. It was in the wilderness of Zin, near Kadesh, where Moses was told by God to speak to a rock, but instead he struck it and water came out. Note also in the wilderness of Zin the town of Avdat. Avdat was a city of the Nabateans. By New Testament times, the Nabateans, an Arabic people, had become traders of spice, incense, and precious metals, using camel caravans to transport their goods. The Nabatean capital was in Petra, but Avdat was one of a series of Nabatean towns controlling routes through the wilderness highlands to the Mediterranean Sea.
We are in the Nabatean city of Avdat. The capital was in Petra, and during the time of Jesus, they developed a trade route from the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean Sea for spices such as frankincense, gold, and myrrh.
Also part of the wilderness of Zin, just east of Kadesh Barnea, is Maktesh Ramon, or the Ramon Crater. The Ramon Crater was carved out in the past by a combination of geological forces and a huge amount of rushing water which emptied east toward the Arava and the Dead Sea. Further south on map 112, note the wilderness of Paran. The southern canyons of the wilderness of Paran reach into Sinai, off the lower side of this map. Ishmael lived in the wilderness of Paran after he and his mother Hagar were cast out by Sarah.
Hi, we're in the wilderness of Paran, where the first generation of Israelites died because of their unbelief.
When the later generations of Israelites entered the Promised Land and lived in nice houses and had plentiful food, they were exhorted to remember their wilderness experience as a reminder that they lived by God's grace.
On the southern edge of map 112, note the port cities of Etzion Geber and Eilat, modern Eilat in Israel and Aqaba in Jordan. Etzion Geber and Eilat are situated on the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba, serving as a connection to the Red Sea, Africa, the Indian Ocean, and beyond. Today, the ports are busy with trade coming from the east. The routes leading north from the Red Sea ports allowed Israel to be a middleman in international trade. The Arava route ran straight north through the Rift Valley toward the Dead Sea. Another route climbed up into Edom. The route through Edom had two branches. The western branch, called the King's Highway, ran along the rim of the plateau. The way of the wilderness ran parallel, but further east. Strong Judean kings, like Solomon, endeavored to control these port cities and routes. King Solomon built a fleet of ships at Etzion Geber, which is near Elot, on the shore of the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. In the sandstone around Mount Timnah, copper was mined and smelted in various periods of history, including, according to recent archaeological excavations, King Solomon's time. The contrasting desert and blue waters make Eilat and Aqaba popular resort cities.
Okay, we are here in the Gulf of Aqaba, which is part of the Reed Sea or the Red Sea, snorkeling at a lot, looking at all kinds of pretty fish on the coral reef.
Now let's look at places associated with the Israelite exodus from Egypt on map 3-1. The descendants of Jacob, or Israel, lived in the land of Goshen, in the eastern Nile delta. They multiplied, but became a threat to a new Egyptian dynasty. Israel was severely persecuted and put to forced labor to build Pithom and Ramses. But the Lord intervened to bring Israel out of Egypt and into the Promised Land. We don't know exactly where the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea occurred. Note that in Hebrew, the body of water was called the Reed Sea. Most likely, the event happened near the modern Timsah and Bitter Lakes. There is evidence that there was much more water in this region in antiquity. Strong evidence that the Red Sea crossing was in this area is that the Bible says that immediately after the miraculous sea crossing, the Israelites went into the wilderness of Shur. From other references in the Bible, we know that the wilderness of Shur was here, on the road that connected Canaan to Egypt. Specifically, the wilderness of Shur was next to, or in front of, Egypt. Since we can locate the wilderness of Shur with certainty, suggestions, usually made with much sensation, that the crossing of the Red Sea was somewhere through the modern Gulf of Aqaba are incorrect. Neither could Mount Sinai be east of the Gulf of Aqaba in modern Saudi Arabia. When the Apostle Paul said that Mount Sinai is in Arabia, he did not mean modern Saudi Arabia. See the link in this video description above for more information on where Arabia was in the Apostle Paul's time. To review, immediately after the miraculous Red Sea crossing, Israel came into the wilderness of Shur. So, the location of the Red Sea crossing was near or just west of the wilderness of Shur. Where is Mount Sinai? We can't be certain. Before mentioning possibilities, note some basic geographical features of the Sinai Peninsula. The Sinai Peninsula is outlined by two bays of the Red Sea that look like rabbit ears on the map, the Gulf of Aqaba and the Gulf of Suez. The Sinai is made up of three main regions. In the north are sands. The center is a limestone plateau, drained by the Wadi el-Arish, the brook or river of Egypt, which in the north forms part of the border of the Promised Land. A road, today called the Hajj Road, travels through central Sinai, connecting Egypt with Etzion Geber. A mountain close to this route could meet the biblical requirements of Mount Sinai's location. In south-central Sinai are granite mountains. A mining route led from Egypt to the region. Here, 1,500-year-old tradition locates Mount Sinai on a high granite mountain, today called Jebel Musa, or Moses Mountain. The Israelites were at Mount Sinai for about 1 year. There, the Lord entered into a covenant with them. Moses was allowed to ascend into the presence of the Lord. But the rest of Israel knew that if God was to dwell with man, man could not go up to God. God must descend to man. The Lord's presence with Israel was evidenced by the tabernacle, and the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies was God's kingly throne. The Lord would bring Israel into the Promised Land so that the world could know that He is God. Many of the site locations mentioned in the Israelite wilderness itinerary are not known, as they were temporary camps named by Israel. A site location we do know is Etzion Geber. Then they set out from Etzion Geber and camped in the wilderness of Zin, that is, Kadesh. Note that Kadesh Barnea today sits just outside of modern Israel's border. Since 1982, the Sinai Peninsula has been under Egyptian control. From Kadesh Barnea, 12 spies explored the Promised Land. After 40 days, they came back to Kadesh Barnea and reported, "We went into the land that you sent us, and it really does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit." But 10 of the 12 spies feared the Canaanite inhabitants and swayed the people, who didn't believe the Lord could bring them into the land. Because of their unbelief, that generation, anyone 20 years and older, was destined to die in the desert. Then, after nearly 4 decades, the second generation was back at Kadesh Barnea, where Moses angrily struck a rock to bring forth water. When Israel traveled along the way of Atharim, the Canaanite king of Arad attacked. But with God's power, Israel defeated the Canaanites there and called the place Hormah, or devoted to God. But the Lord didn't lead Israel into the promised land from the south. Instead, they came to Punon and asked Edom a second time to allow passage through Edomite territory on the king's highway. But Edom refused. When Israel learned of the required long detour, they complained, and many died from poisonous snake bites. Their only salvation was to look upon God's provision, which foreshadowed the Lord's provision in Jesus some 1,400 years later. The area around Punon was rich in copper mining. The ruin nearby, called Ir Nachash, means city of the snake. So Israel started on a long journey to go around Edom. At some point, they turned from the Arava road and traveled east of Edom on the way of the wilderness. They passed east of Moab as well, because the Lord had instructed Israel not to make war with either Edom or Moab.
It's a great land. There's plenty of fruit. We are doomed. Oh, we're done so. Done so. The cities are enormous. The people are big. Quiet, cowards. Look at me. Quiet. No, we should surely go up there, for with God we can do all things.
We are under 20. We survived the unfaithful report of the spies.